Dan Rubenstein, been about 48 hours, since the conclusion of the college football season. I know we have the Army-Navy game. We can talk about that game on Thursday. I know it's not completely in the books, but I think for all intents and purposes here on the Solid Verbal, the people that listen to the Solid Verbal, we know the playoff field. We know who won conferences. We know where bowl matchups are going to be, what they're looking like. We'll talk through a bunch of those and much, much more. Also, time of recording, the portal is opening, so really no rest for the weary here. My friend, how are you today?
No, man. I'm good. It's still, drinking from a fire hose. That's our favorite phrase for when things are happening all at once, when we have playoff selection, bowl selection, coaches moving all around. Like Barry Odom is reportedly going to Purdue, among a bunch of other happenings in the silly season coaching carousel world. And portal stuff. And there's a lot of big names, a lot of known names. When I say known, not no names, known.
No one.
KNOWN names. And will be fascinating to see who ends up where, especially quarterback being as high profile as it is. And I don't know, is this like the last season of the bonus COVID year? I don't know. Do some math with me, because I'm seeing TJ Finley entering for the fourth time. Auburn, LSU, Texas State, Western Kentucky, and now he'll have a fifth destination or a fifth place. I think it's the end. I think. I don't know. Maybe we'll have another year of it if my math is off. But man, there's some of those guys. And then there are some guys where you lose a coach, or you try to stick it out with the new coach and it wasn't a fit, or somebody younger came up and supplanted you. So there's a lot of interesting conversation and movement happening in the portal.
A lot of interesting things going on for sure. We will do our best to kind of get you up to speed with everything that you need to know. Coming up later this week, we're going to have our friend Bill Connolly on the show to talk through, just put sort of a ribbon, a bow on the season that was and things that jumped out to him, things that he's looking for moving forward. In very short order, we're going to have bowl preview numero uno.
Mm-hmm.
We have broken up all of the other bowls into two big shows. So there's going to be a bowl preview 1 and a bowl preview 2 coming up, I guess, around the next week timetable, somewhere in that neighborhood. And we're also going to have our playoff preview next Tuesday. So a lot brewing here in the Verballer hood, not the least of which is Bowl Bingo, Dan. Bowl Bingo.
Yes.
I will talk about Bowl Bingo a little bit later on in this episode, but Bowl Bingo is going to be the successor to Winter Wonders, which we have run the last couple of years. It's been a confidence pool, but since the bowl season has changed, we took it upon ourselves to change the game and give the Verballer hood access to something that they have never, ever played before. Just go on out to verballers.com and sign up for the free tier. That is my one bit of advice. Go to the free tier. I'm not going to spam you. You don't got to pay for this, but all are welcome. You just got to sign up as a part of the free tier, and then you'll get access to Bowl Bingo when that goes up a little bit later on this week. Oh, if you've made it this far, hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes, Dan. Let's get into news.
Please.
Dude, my voice is pretty damn raspy from the weekend.
And you slept well. That's usually a good healing path, but no, you're still getting back up to average here.
Last year, the second the season ended, I got really sick.
All right, Ty, we got a long, robust offseason here.
I know. Some
playoff postseason.
I'm trying to keep it together. I'm trying to make sure that I'm hydrated, that I'm drinking all the right stuff to try and, keep me in good shape. But alas, we have a new Verballer poll. It's the final Verballer poll of the season. I asked people, you may recall, on the Saturday Night Live stream, the reaction stream, to go on out, sign up, and vote. The results are similar, albeit a little bit different, between our Verballers and what the committee came down with. Oregon, Georgia, 1-2, no surprise there. Notre Dame by 3 points. 3 points over Texas, 3-4. Penn State at 5, Ohio State at 6, Tennessee at 7, Boise State at 8, Arizona State all the way up to 9. That's a bit of a difference. They were 12 in the CFP poll.
Yeah.
Indiana down to 10. SMU at 11. Clemson at 12. Notably, Clemson at 12 over Alabama. My hunch is when people voted, they were not just voting in terms of who the best 12 are, but who they thought should get into
Right, the 12 playoff teams. Yeah.
the playoff field. So you could take a look at this, Dan. We got the 12 teams in the Verballer poll. SMU included in there, ranked above Clemson, despite the fact that Clemson beat them in the ACC game. That sort of mimics what we saw based on the playoff committee suggestions. So we'll put one more of these out after everything is said and done. Again, stay tuned to that free tier out at verballers.com. We will make sure that the final poll of the season at some point in January is open to all who are interested. But I don't know if I have any thoughts on this. I guess where I wanted to start this podcast today is any lingering thoughts you have now, because we do have bowl matchups that we can talk through here a little bit just to give people a primer for what's to come. We obviously have been thinking through, just on like a podcast level, what the hell our schedule's going to be now that they're playing these games at odd times. The first round is over the weekend. The next round is New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. After that, I think we've got a Tuesday, Wednesday game, and then the championship game is played on a Monday night. So very few of these abide by like the normal parameters of a college football schedule. So we've been thinking about that and what it all means and how we're going to cover things moving forward. But lingering thoughts from the weekend now that we know matchups.
Including the playoff, including the bowls, including what we already saw in terms of championship games, anything?
Yeah.
Or just in life?
I mean, we should probably stick to college football since it's a college football show, but
no, not a terribly long list of lingering thoughts. You have the expected Alabama and SEC talking points that were sort of tedious and grasping at straws-ish a little bit too much. And that's fine. I would do the same thing if I were an Alabama fan. Like, you have to go to bat for your team. You have to go to bat for your viewpoint, from your vantage point, whatever. And so, yeah, that's fine. It's all expected. And, the talking points about SMU, the talking points that I think both Greg Byrne and Nick Saban, national ESPN college football analysts,
shared via Google Docs.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Of like, why even schedule like strong non-conference games? And I saw Bill Connolly. He was like, well, Alabama's non-conference, the final SP Plus ratings were like 67th, 70th, and 77th.
That's right.
And an FCS team for Alabama. They lost SEC games, and I saw there was a stat that like Alabama had 2 losses to teams outside of the SP Plus top 30 in Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. And the 7 at-large schools that did get playoff bids combined for 2 between them. So, there's some context lost in these things. I understand where everybody's coming from. And again, I would do the same exact thing if Oregon were left out in a similar manner. But no, beyond that, I think I'm excited for what these new matchups have in store. Disappointed that my team in its first matchup has to play the winner between Ohio State and Tennessee. But at the same time, I don't know. If you're number one, they should be scared of you more than you should be scared of them, right?
One would think. Yeah, one would think. I will say this kind of as an aside. I think the reaction to the playoff field that I appreciated the most came from the people who were clearly trying to find their own angle on it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see the Jim Nagy NFL tweets? Did you see that
stuff?
Oh,
that it should be an all SEC playoff because they have the most potential first through third round picks or something?
Yeah, the metric by which Jim was using was NFL talent. If I were an SEC coach and AD, I too would be upset knowing how much NFL talent is on the roster, to which I tweeted out and I said, hey, if they just want to crown a champion in July, it'd save us a lot of work, Dan.
It would.
Save us a lot of work. We don't got to do any of this.
Well, you know how they review restaurants, right? They take a look at the shopping lists.
That's right.
And then they say, well, this clearly must be the best restaurant. They ordered the most high quality lobster, so they must do the best job with it, right? That's how they review restaurants.
Yeah.
Am I mistaken? So cool that hypothetically LSU is so much more talented than other teams, and in practice they lost to an extraordinarily average Big Ten team to open the season. Yeah,
I love the tweets that are always like sort of dancing around the point, include a little bit of a humble brag just to assert authority.
Sure.
And are playing into the trending news topics of the moment, if only to go viral. Those are my favorites. So that was my tweet of the weekend on that front. The thing that I would add here,
please,
I wasn't sure if you were going to bring it up, but lingering thoughts with regard to the playoff. The news on Carson Beck is not particularly great.
Woof, yeah. Real bummed to see it.
Carson Beck has injured his UCL. If you're a baseball fan, you're used to pitchers in particular, having UCL injuries. It is never good for you. It is the ligament on the inside part of the elbow. I'm pointing to it now in the video. Maybe you can see it.
Yeah.
I have hurt that ligament before in the past. It renders your arm into a noodle. It sucks. It is not fun. Bear in mind, I am not a high caliber quarterback nor a pitcher. I work at a keyboard now. But back in the day when I was playing baseball, you try to throw after you injure that ligament, your arm is dead.
Yes.
So the fact that he came in and had that, as I've said, dramatic game-winning handoff is a testament to, I think, his toughness, because it doesn't feel good. I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly now calls into question where things stand in this playoff. I don't think it sounds promising. It sounds like he's going to get a second opinion on it. Clearly, he's got an NFL future, whether as part of this draft class, presumably
right. It might be
next.
in 3 years or something. Yeah.
I mean, Carson Beck has had his moments this season, but Carson Beck is absolutely still a high-level prospect. So the fact that this comes now is really, really upsetting if you're a Georgia fan. I would say conversely, as a Notre Dame fan, I'm looking at this news, and though I don't want anybody to get hurt, I'm saying, okay, well, Gunnar Stockton, that changes the calculus a little bit. That makes you feel, I guess, a little bit better if you're Notre Dame. Even if you're Indiana, I don't want to pan Indiana in this game. Coming out of that quadrant of the bracket, it definitely raises a bunch of questions now. We were waiting for more news on this. It seems as if some trickled out here. We're recording this on Monday. We'll wait to see what that second opinion looks like. We'll wait to see what the doctors have to say. But for sure, if they're at all concerned about his future, if he's concerned about his future in the NFL, logic would seem to point to the fact that we're not going to see Carson Beck for a while.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And I know some Georgia fans have sort of pointed out that, like, oh, we'll be fine. Gunnar Stockton, don't sleep on Gunnar Stockton. He might be okay. He might be pretty good. You never want your backup quarterback to be thrust into this kind of position after sitting all season long, as much as Carson Beck at times has struggled to live up to expectations that I think we all had of him coming into the season, in terms of interceptions, in terms of not seeing pass rushes, and just making throws that were unfortunate. That just, Gunnar Stockton might be okay, but you don't want him in this position at this moment. And that it's certainly something that doesn't mean Georgia's automatically going to lose early, but
no,
Georgia's not at full strength with Gunnar Stockton.
The thought that has been bouncing around in my mind since I got this news, you know, we saw Carson Beck in that game and he didn't play in the second half. He did come in later, saw the ice pack. It was very visible that something was wrong. This is not to say it was a dramatic injury the way we saw a year ago with Jordan Travis.
Right.
And I know this is perhaps a weird hypothetical, but I was comparing the two in my head. In both instances, Georgia and Florida State, these are teams that won their conferences. But the Jordan Travis injury was dramatic, and I think apparent to everybody watching that it was very bad, and it was going to stay that way, regardless of whether Florida State was in the playoff or not.
Right.
I don't think there's much debate that the committee held that against Florida State and kept them out of the playoff as a result of it. This is not me begging for Carson Beck's injury to have been more ghastly for the television audience.
Okay, good.
Okay, let me just get that clear. But I just wonder if there isn't some bit of, he got hurt, nobody knew how badly he was hurt. They're going to be rewarded with the number 2 overall seed, deal with the ramifications later. Like, if that injury had been more apparent and worse right out of the chute, if the committee would have treated them in the same capacity they treated Florida State.
I think it was pretty clear to everybody involved that they were just like immediately, yep, not coming back for the second half. That if he were beat up, if it were sore, if it were something, this is the SEC championship game. I'm sure that if he were given the choice, he absolutely would have chosen to come back if physically possible.
Yeah.
And so I think the committee knew well enough that it was going to be a pretty serious injury, and they weren't going to do this 2 years in a row. They just weren't after what happened with Florida State last year. So no, I don't know if it had been so obvious and so violently ghastly or something like that they would have knocked Georgia down. But
I mean, Georgia was getting in regardless because they won the conference.
Of course.
So that's it. It's not exactly apples to apples.
And they were going to get the bye. They couldn't drop Georgia 7 spots or something after beating Texas.
No. But I don't know. Stray thought bouncing around in my head. The other thing I would add, and maybe this is a natural segue over into bowl season and some of the other matchups. You and I talked offline a little bit as we were trying to figure out what our schedule is going to be like this postseason now because they've changed the schedule so much. And the crop of other bowl games is not exactly inspiring.
Sure.
And I do wonder if one of the knock-on consequences of this 12-team playoff is with so many of the better teams playing against one another, that means that there is less interest in bowl season than before. I mean, there were already 40 some odd games. So you pick and choose the ones that I think you're interested in. But I'm looking at these matchups, man, and I'm like, ooh, there's 5 games that I think are really interesting to me. There are a bunch of other ones that don't exactly make me want to set a reminder.
Right. So here's the other thing too. It's you don't even know what these games are going to be. Like even a game that you're going to like hypothetically enjoy, like Miami's bowl game, like Cam Ward's not playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, likely.
And the Pop-Tarts Bowl, by the way, looks like maybe, at least on its face, one of the best matchups all bowl season. So it's like, if that's going to be the case, between two kind of fringe playoff teams from this past year with a bunch of guys sitting out, I don't know what the Iowa State side is going to look like, but you're right on Miami. That to me is a little bit disappointing, and I don't think there's really any way around it.
You could look up and down, like Cal UNLV. It's no longer the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl. It's the Art of Sport LA Bowl. Is what I'm seeing here.
Art of Sport, yeah.
Who's Cal's offensive coordinator? Who's going to play quarterback for Cal? I mean, could be Fernando Mendoza. I have no idea. Like the portal opened as we were speaking. Like Tulane, Florida are playing in the Gasparilla Bowl. Darian Mensah is in the portal. Darian Mensah is not going to play for Tulane. Is DJ Lagway going to sit out just to further rest his hamstring or something like that? I don't know. Like, you don't want to risk anything for the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl. It's in Tampa. It's local-ish to the state of Florida. Like, you go through here, and there's just, like, the list of games with, Mikey Keene's gone from Fresno State. They're playing NIU. Okay, I'll watch that game. It's the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, I believe, is what we have down here. Yep. I'll watch. I always love seeing the possibility of snow on blue turf, but what are you supposed to take from it? That's the interesting thing to me is, like, we can find very interesting reasons to watch these games. That's not difficult.
No.
The difficult thing is getting juiced up on the announcement to be like, ooh, that's going to be fun. Ooh, look at this Holiday Bowl. Ooh, look at this Vegas Bowl. Like, Miller Moss is gone. Wasn't the starter at the end of the year. Conner Weigman gone. Wasn't the starter at the end of the year. But who else is going to join those players at those schools? So with Texas A&M, it's a first-year coach finishing up his inaugural season, and a lot of players gave him a shot, and now they're going to say, like, well, wasn't a fit. I'm going to head into the portal. What is Texas A&M's lineup going to look like? Who's going to join Miller Moss from USC on the offensive side of the ball for, USC or formerly USC players? And down the line, it's, Iowa State, Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Miami disappointed. Going into that game, disappointed. Iowa State going into that game, disappointed. Where it was on the precipice, as you mentioned. Who's going to be there? Who's going to poach coaches? Who's going to poach players? And so, I don't know. It feels like we are heading towards something obvious.
And that is?
And the obvious thing is a restructuring of what the postseason is. If people stop watching and that's an if, because people will always watch mediocre football rather than watch like good basketball for whatever reason. Because they love football. So I don't know what that restructuring is. I don't know if it's a consolidation. I don't know if it's a schedule change. But I think when you look at this sport, I think the last thing to be considered is going to be like the sanctity of the Music City Bowl.
Right.
And so I don't know if that means fewer bowls. I don't know if this means bowls bundled in a playoff type system that isn't exactly the playoff, that creates some sort of heightened prizing for the winner or championship teams or something like that. Alabama was a hair away from the playoff, and they're taking on a 7-5 Michigan team in the ReliaQuest Bowl.
Yeah.
It's not a consolation for really either one of these teams and fan bases. So I don't know. I think eventually we're going to reach the point where, the Citrus Bowl is kind of interesting to me. I think it will be interesting no matter what. South Carolina, Illinois.
Yeah.
It's one of the few.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be an annually tougher and tougher sell to get people to travel, pay for tickets, pay for hotels and rental cars, and tune in, frankly. Like, the fans of the teams will, because football is a scarce resource. But are the casual fans going to tune into the ReliaQuest Bowl, given who might not even be anywhere near that stadium? I don't know.
Yeah, look, that was one of the challenges with putting together a game this postseason. Not to promote the game any further, but
right.
One of the things, some of the feedback that I got with regard to the confidence pool is like, hey, it's a cool concept. Confidence pools have been around since the beginning of time. That said, it's increasingly more difficult to be confident in anything.
Of course.
I don't know how you bet on half of these games with the point spread in this day and age because of opt-outs, because of sheer motivations to be there or not be there, because of the transfer portal side of it. There's just so many more things that you need to consider. That's part of the reason why I wanted to move away from it, because bowl season in and of itself has gotten way more complicated with all of these external factors. We're trying to keep the game pretty simple that everybody can enjoy it. And I think that's part of the problem now. You're right. We could come to a point at some point in the future here where, we were joking around about kind of a tournament of bowls of sorts. Mm-hmm. Like the bowls kind of reorganize themselves into pods and find a way to conduct their own tournament separate from the college football playoff, just because, I don't know, this isn't really doing it for me. Now, we will find ways to be interested in these games. I've found a number of them already that I think are interesting just on their face, given where these teams have been this season. The question is, who will be playing? The question is, who will be transferring? We've got a number of those situations. I pulled out the Birmingham Bowl right away between Georgia Tech and Vandy, two teams that provided a ton of storylines this season. There's no doubt about that. I'm interested in that game. And then, of course, I read that Eric Singleton, top wide receiver for Georgia Tech, is going to be entering the transfer portal. So we're going to have stories like this creep out over the next couple days. And not only are we going to have to react to that, but we're going to have to figure out what does that mean come bowl season. There are a couple, though. All right, Georgia Tech Vandy, I think, is one obvious one. I think Syracuse Wazoo could be a ton of fun. A lot of offense potentially.
I hope so. Yeah.
In that game. I'm interested in seeing what happens there. Beyond that, the Rutgers K-State game and the Rate Bowl, I have almost no idea what to expect there.
Right.
Almost no idea what to expect. So I'm curious at a minimum. I don't know who's playing in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl from a player standpoint, but Texas Tech, Arkansas feels like it could be a really fun matchup to me.
Okay, yeah.
I would also add that BYU Colorado, the Alamo Bowl, jumps off the page. I don't think Shedeur Sanders nor Travis Hunter are playing in that game.
Hard to imagine.
So I would probably favor BYU. I don't know what the point spread is. I have not seen that. At least that looks like an interesting matchup. It's two Big 12 teams, which is a little weird. But at the same time, BYU versus Colorado would be an interesting storyline at a bare minimum. You already mentioned Iowa State versus Miami. We don't need to go into more details about that, nor Alabama versus Michigan. I do kind of think that the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl has a lot of weird game potential. That's Louisville versus Washington.
Sure.
I would presume that Tyler Shuck will be playing in that game. And two teams that I just say from a personal level, I had a hard time trying to figure out what each of them was going to do this season. And kind of to that point, Baylor versus LSU, two more teams that are playing in the Texas Bowl.
Yeah.
I had trouble putting a finger on both of them this season. No idea what to expect. That has a lot of weird game potential with a lot of offense.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in those.
I mean, Iowa Mizzou could be interesting. Maybe, sort of, kind of. That's Music City Bowl.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I'm searching here.
The way that this thing is set up now.
Yeah.
The college football playoff is interwoven into bowl season as we know it. The games start up on December the 20th. The first college football playoff game is Friday, December 20th at 8 p.m. ESPN. It's in Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame hosting Indiana. The following day, there are three games. It's SMU at Penn State early. They're hosting a whiteout at noon, which is different, but okay. The second is at 4 p.m. It's number 12 Clemson at number 5 Texas.
That is officially a whiteout, by the way?
It is a whiteout.
Penn State announced that they're doing a whiteout for the SMU. Okay.
They tweeted that out. And then the late game in the shoe is number 9 Tennessee against number 8 Ohio State.
Yes.
So those games are kind of the first weekend of bowl season. There's about 10-ish days in between rounds. After that, we go to the 4 games of the quarterfinals, add on 10 more days, thereabouts. You get to the semis, add on 10 more, you get to the final. So this thing goes up until January the 20th. Bowl season, I guess bowl season proper, if you want to consider kind of the old format, the old bowl games, that concludes on January the 4th. So we're going to have about 2.5 weeks in between when the other bowl games end and when the national championship is. One interesting change, the Bahamas Bowl, which typically has been one of the first games, is now the absolute last game between Buffalo and Liberty on Saturday, the 4th of January. So, which I kind of like because Bahamas Bowl, a lot of people had forgotten about that. I know because I've seen the bowl pick'em entries that we've had in the past. It's nice to give them their due and have the main stage for themselves.
And congratulations, Bahamas Bowl. You are down at least one starting quarterback with Caden Salter in the portal. Yeah.
Caden Salter in the portal. Any other bowl thoughts before we get to the transfer portal now?
No, it was the first year in which I just figured like, yeah, I'll check back in at like 5 or 6 p.m. on Sunday to see what the bowls are instead of following along as they were coming out in the afternoon, just because with the expanded playoff, you're just like, well, what are the opt-outs going to look like? What are the coaching changes going to look like? And, you know, it felt like an especially easy year to say like, yeah, let's just have number 13 and 14 play each other and 15 and, you know, do like a top 25 tournament type thing of the teams that didn't make it in. But, you know, here we are, and it's going to be, as you mentioned, it's going to be very tough for any of these top, you know, draft consideration type players to justify playing in an Alamo Bowl or a ReliaQuest Bowl or a Music City Bowl type thing. And I hope for the sake of these bowls, people watch, but you know, the sport is making it more and more difficult to justify.
It'll be interesting to see what happens on the viewership side of this, because most of these games are on ESPN. And my hunch is that if there is any kind of dip in viewership for one reason or another, maybe it's a playoff thing, maybe it's, who knows? Maybe that's what leads to some changes. But this is the first year since we've been doing this podcast, and really the first year since I started following college football, I should say. I didn't start college football.
Right.
Where I looked at the bowl matchups and I was like, wow, this feels different to me than it has in the past.
Yeah. Definitely does. By the way, just when you mentioned it, the possibly headline matchup in the opening round of the college football playoff, Tennessee, Ohio State. That's an ESPN game?
ESPN game, yeah, 8 p.m.
No brainer for the pregame show to pipe in Baker Mayfield, who absolutely dismantled the emotions of both of these fan bases on the road to weigh in on this matchup. I think it was either overtime or double overtime against Tennessee. And like Oklahoma didn't play all that well, if memory serves, but they came back from a pretty ridiculous deficit to win. And then, of course, he did plant the flag. He was successful in planting the flag in Ohio Stadium.
Yep.
So you got to bring on Baker, right? Just a little bit of Baker Mayfield on that pregame broadcast.
In that pregame.
Yeah.
Never know when you need it.
Yeah.
Want to talk some portal smoke?
Please.
All right. Portal's open, Dan. The portal is open. It is sort of my favorite thing all college football season.
Okay.
I love the fact that the two teams that I stick for, however weirdly that may sound, are in the college football playoff. I love that your team is also in the college football playoff. I love that we had a year with a tick more parity and a ton more volatility. I like all of these things immensely. The portal is my new thing. I love the portal.
Okay. I like speaking of which, I like the flag that you've planted about this.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it. It has introduced a level of uncertainty into the sport. Not that it needed any more of it. I realize there are downsides, but I do like it.
Full disclosure, we root for Notre Dame and Oregon, who have been incredible beneficiaries.
Incredible beneficiaries, yes.
So, of course, a Notre Dame person and Oregon person would be like, yeah, this is a pretty fun time.
I get it.
Yeah.
Believe me, I get it. I have spoken to that very point.
Yes.
In the early hours now of the portal being open, Dan, can you walk us through some of the names that you have heard?
Oh, man.
Some of the points of intrigue that the audience might be interested in.
I mean, it's going to be quarterback, right? That is going to be the headline position because that is who touches the ball every play and can take you from being an average team to at least an interesting team. And you look at some of the teams that are in the playoff, and Indiana wasn't Indiana, and then Curtis Rourke is one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten this last season under Kurt Signetti, and that was a huge difference maker. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel on the number one team. Like, you look across the board, Will Howard at Ohio State, that you can find a quarterback to take you from, or either maintain an excellent status, or take you from bad to decent to good. And so, yeah, I mean, Miller Moss is an interesting name, and I think he is looking at reportedly, like Mizzou and Louisville. Thomas Castellanos, perhaps reigniting the spark with Gus Malzahn. He was UCF and now looking at Florida State.
Okay.
Darian Mensah is a big name, Tulane, and he's especially interesting because he has a lot of time. Syracuse is a name that has come up with him, obviously having a lot of success with Kyle McCord as a transfer. So I don't know. Quarterback, you look at Jackson Arnold is supposedly Mississippi State heavy. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Conner Weigman, I think there's going to be somebody, if he lands at the right spot, that there are people that are going to say, like, well, he's had shaky offensive line play and bad injury luck, and you get the right place with the right offensive line and the right coordinator, and sometimes you just need a fresh start. Maybe he's the next Bo Nix, coming in as a highly regarded guy, and it just didn't work out. A lot of changes around him. Somebody like that, I think, could be interesting, and sort of obviously gave everything he had to Texas A&M. Devin Brown at Ohio State came in super well regarded.
Saw that.
And he's staying through the playoff, I believe he mentioned. And so he seems to be somebody who's sort of doing it. I don't know if the right way, that's sort of like a weird way to define it, but like, he's remaining pretty loyal to Ohio State. So I think you should, if you're an Ohio State person, regard him pretty highly. Across the board, I think you're going to see quarterbacks being the big names. It seems to be like a pretty deep, interesting receiver class as well.
Oh man, I got the page loaded up right now.
And it's always going to be the case.
Receivers
always going to be interesting.
Receivers always going to be interesting, and a lot of these guys aren't going to hit with their new team. They're just not. I feel like the hit rate might even be lower with receivers. I don't have any data to back that up. That's completely anecdotal. But some of the names in the portal, my man, some of the names in the portal are definitely going to move the needle for teams that we root for.
Sure.
CJ Daniels, a pretty big one from LSU in the portal. KC Concepcion, I believe we talked about that at some point here over the last couple days.
Supposedly hot and heavy with Bama, maybe Ole Miss, looking SEC. Yeah.
I saw that Caleb Burton, a name from
Sure.
Auburn.
Yep.
I think could be of interest for some others. Scrolling through the list here, Dane Key and Barian Brown, both from Kentucky, both in the portal.
Yep.
Seems like there'd be some interest there. I believe it was Dane Key, who I talked about extensively last year with some issues he had with drops. Didn't quite have those drops issues this season, but there were other issues at play clearly within that Kentucky offense. So understand why he might want to look elsewhere. Eric Singleton seems like he's a pretty big name.
Oh, yeah.
In this portal class. And right now, as I look at this, it seems like there's interest from Georgia, there's interest from Auburn, but Eric Singleton, with what he did at Georgia Tech, that's a pretty big loss for the Yellow Jackets, and it's definitely going to be a pretty big gain for whoever decides they're going to, be able to reel him in. So Eric Singleton's another one. Jonte Cook, we mentioned Jonte Cook before. Jonte Cook now officially in the transfer portal from Texas, was lightly used at Texas, but still a name that I think is of note for people who follow these things. We're going to continue to see more and more names get added. If history is any guide with respect to the transfer portal, it's one of those deals where we just have names creep and creep and creep and creep and creep.
Sure.
And suddenly there's going to be one that you don't expect that sort of gets everybody talking, but it's still sort of early days with respect to this portal. As you said, for sure, the big names are going to be on the quarterback side of things, but we're going to continue to see others trickle in on both sides of the football. So we'll do our best to stay up to date. We did our best here to try and get a portal guest on, but obviously it's a bit of a busy day, so weren't able to make that happen today. We'll maybe try for that the next time around.
Yeah, and it's also based on what happens with coordinators and head coaches. Obviously, then you're going to see guys entering and following, or entering and starting a new path, whatever, with the guy who recruited them there, or the head coach being fired and finding some new landing spot. And I saw Giovanni McCoy at Oregon State. We'll see what happens with John Mateer. Lost his offensive coordinator, had a great season, mostly for Washington State. And so, that's why it's sort of a continuous fluid thing, is because it's all tied together. I'm fascinated to see, the position group that seems to be the most difficult and the most scarce is going to be offensive line. It just seems, for whatever reason, it's really difficult to pull guys off of rosters, or convince guys to leave, or whatever. That you see it from, I think it's an Illinois State offensive tackle is super well regarded in this, just because he's got the physical makeup to come in. And Oregon's starting a Rhode Island transfer, an FCS transfer, a right tackle, and they have for the past 2 years. And so if I'm representing any of those guys, I'm asking for the moon.
Yeah.
In this moment, if I'm representing a pretty good to very good offensive line prospect, that's where it seems extraordinarily rare and valuable to, like, oh, we can shore up the right side of our line in a don't even think about it kind of way. Like, that's going to cost you a pretty penny. You're going to see guys along the defensive line. I think Alabama lost. Jaheim Otis left midway through the year. Obviously, Bear Alexander was a big name. He's visiting schools, it seems, or is about to start visiting schools. And, the best of Bear Alexander is very difficult to deal with. Yeah. Perhaps in more ways than one, but that is, that's going to be a huge name if a team can get the best of him. And you're going to see a lot of teams talking themselves into, like, well, he was a 4-star who went to Texas. He was a 4-star who went to Ohio State. He was a 4-star who went to Florida, and hoping for the best. And a lot of these guys, you see the announcement and they're like, he had 844 receiving yards in his career over the past 5 years. And you're just like, wait, that doesn't amount to a lot, Ty. That does not amount to a ton of yardage.
No.
If we're talking about incoming as a star starter kind of type. So no, it's all going to be fascinating. It's all going to happen very quickly. And you're going to see the same teams, Colorado, Ole Miss, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, hitting the portal to fill in those gaps that we've seen every year. And you're going to see teams like Alabama or Texas A&M who had first-year coaches. They're going to lose a bunch and they're going to bring in a bunch. And I think they're going to bring in a bunch of good players, based on what we're seeing already that has entered the portal.
The name that I am most interested in, is Dylan Thieneman from
Purdue,
the defensive back.
Yeah.
I mean, he's from Indiana. We obviously understand there's a lot going on at Purdue right now with the coaching change. Looks like Barry Odom.
Dude, their tight end is good too. Zach Clare, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I mean, typically when you've got coaching changes, you see stuff like this go down. But Thieneman's a guy that I think Notre Dame needs to go in hard after.
Sure.
Because he's, relatively speaking, a local kid. Clearly, Notre Dame's had a pretty good track record for developing safeties. And he's a guy who I think could come in and make an impact. So I'm not making the pitch. I'm advising they make the pitch to try and bring Thieneman to South Bend.
Yeah, I don't have a wish list for Oregon. I imagine they're going to look at offensive line, running back, maybe a receiver, maybe a safety or two. But obviously, they've recruited quite well. Tight end is interesting. Tight end is certainly interesting. They whiffed on a couple of targets in this recruiting class, top 5 types. So yeah. I think they want to build up depth there. But they lose 2 of the 3 guys they play the snaps this year. So yeah, that would be my expectation for Oregon. They will, in all likelihood, not be starting another new transfer at quarterback. No. They'll be starting last year's transfer at Dante Moore at quarterback next year.
I think the name that I am most interested in this entire cycle is Anthony Calandria from
Really?
UVA. Yeah.
Why?
Out of high school, so Calandria is from St. Petersburg. Out of high school, there was a lot of steam on Calandria, who I think was a 3-star, not getting enough love, being better than some of recruiting rankings, things like that, was not as heavily recruited as he might be now in the transfer portal. I think at time of recording, he figures in as a top 10 guy in the transfer portal.
By the way, it was Max Clare. Let me be clear. Not Zach Clare. Max Clare.
But Calandria, not a big guy. I don't even think he's 6 foot. But I think over the course of his 2 years at Virginia, when we've seen him, has definitely shown flashes. Like, he's a fun player to watch, if nothing more.
Sure.
I don't know where he ends up. I don't know what the future holds for him. I don't necessarily think he's a pro prospect, but I tend to gravitate towards players that are kind of improvisers and fun. And I think he kind of checks those boxes. It would not surprise me if he catches on with somebody down in the state of Florida. I have not seen any rumors, so I could be well off on that. But Calandria is a name that, for me anyway, is one of the more interesting names that are in this entire portal.
Utah down 3 quarterbacks. Obviously made a change at offensive coordinator, but Brandon Rose, Isaac Wilson, and Sam Heward. Wow. Sam Heward, a former 5-star, will be on to his 4th school, I believe. So, Washington, Cal Poly, Utah. Yeah.
Does that mean that Cam Rising's coming back for year number 99?
I have no idea. They'll probably get a transfer in from somewhere else. I've seen smoke around a couple guys with Utah. I mean, it's also dependent on what else happens with the head coach. I guess at this point we presume Kyle Whittington back, but who knows?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It is. I mean, again, I wasn't joking. TJ Finley is heading towards his 5th destination. That's incredible. That is legitimately incredible. And you knew something was going to break at Ohio State with that room, because it is, I think they have a top flight quarterback the next class, or this current class they signed. So it's Aaron Nolan was the last class.
Right.
Julian Sayin, they poached from Alabama when Nick Saban left. They had Lincoln Keenholz, who played a little bit in their bowl game against Mizzou last year, if memory serves. He was a 4-star type. And obviously Will Howard's gone after this season. And then Tavian St. Clair, great name, coming in. So I expect dominoes at some of those big places that have stacked quarterbacks these past few years. That's just the reality of it. But man, it's just starting to spin, this portal carousel. Yeah.
The portal carousel. Yeah. And on that note, with regard to carousels, the final thing that I wanted to discuss on this podcast today, it is not breaking news. It is not any kind of promotion for a game, and it is not the transfer portal. It is these persistent, now more persistent rumors that Bill Belichick may be the coach at North Carolina, Dan.
Man, what is the latest reporting? That like talks are ongoing? Was that the last you saw?
The last I saw was from Adam Schefter. That was this morning, sort of confirming what Pete Thamel's been saying, which is talks are ongoing. They're interested in Belichick. Belichick seems interested in them. There's some sort of clause perhaps that would maybe turn the program over to Belichick's son if and when he walks away, and that did not put UNC off.
Who's currently the defensive coordinator at Washington?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I don't know if you want to hitch your wagon that much to Bill Belichick. I do understand that there would be perhaps a recruiting draw there. Come and play for perhaps the greatest NFL coach of all time. So as a lot of these guys are getting ready, trying to figure out where they want to go, talk about somebody who can get you ready for the NFL, that is something that Bill Belichick has in his quiver for sure. He's never coached, at least not in a while, at the college level.
Right.
Signing up to essentially establish a Belichick dynasty of coaches doesn't seem like a great deal for North Carolina unless it works. Unless it works, then maybe that's different, but just seems like it may not be worth the trouble.
I'm so confused by this. I'm so confused that this is just an exercise in North Carolina making it seem so attractive that the greatest NFL coach ever, I think that's what he is, right? If you consider the Super Bowls. So, but previously on Bill Belichick's tenure as an NFL coach, it was going terribly wrong, right?
It's not good, no.
Like he actively was told that we're good, greatest coach ever. So that's not great momentum-wise. Also, when you look at the hires that have worked out really well in college football, and you have to assume North Carolina wants this hire to work out really well, it's typically somebody who has spent time in or around a major program to sort of understand the rhythms, to have high school recruiting connections, to have portal connections, guys they've recruited that they can bring with them, or have sort of an idea of what it is to work in major college football in 2024-25 and grind on the recruiting trail, grind in the portal, have the ability and the network to build out a front office to get all of that organized, to maintain the current players on the roster. Bill Belichick checks none of those boxes.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to find, maybe you won't find the next Dan Lanning or something, but like, find the next Brent Key, find the next Fran Brown, find the next Mike Elko. And this isn't it, man. You're finding the next Herm Edwards.
Belichick has never coached at the college level. Obviously, his son has.
Right.
Clearly, he's got the name. He's got the name.
I hate this whole thing. Yeah.
He's got the name, and if Dion has taught us anything, it's that having that name can matter.
Similar personalities, Bill Belichick and Deion Sanders, right?
But Bill Belichick does not have the swagger of Coach Prime.
Deion Sanders was a college football coach before he was at Colorado. He was at Jackson State and did incredibly well and recruited, had connections. Bill Belichick is on the Manning cast saying like, I don't know if I would have done that. Oh, yeah, we coached him. Insane. What an insane line of thinking. If it is genuine.
If it's genuine.
What a waste of time for North Carolina to go through this. Okay. It's your team. It's your program. It's your school.
I couldn't believe it when I saw this. Oh, my God. This is going to be a great story for us if and when it happens.
To hand it off to his son in 2 years.
Yeah.
Come on. It's pathetic. Try North Carolina. At least try.
Maybe it'll work.
No, you know it's not going to work. In what universe is Bill Belichick going to be like watching cut-ups of the Elite 11? Go, yeah, that's look at that. Is he going to be like flying, getting on a plane after practice to go and fly and watch a linebacker commit play in Tampa? No. Hire a real coach, a real college coach. Hire somebody with a vision to say, I've been successful doing this as a defensive coordinator or a DB's coach or a receivers coach or an offensive coordinator. And this is what, look at all these guys I recruited. Look at all these connections I have. This is the vision I have. These are the coaches I'll bring with me. My son in 2 years. So silly. If true. Again.
If true.
We could be just be dum-dums reacting to a non-story here. But I don't know. Try North Carolina. You seem to be a really cool school to me from afar. with potential. You've been in big
I
games.
applied. I didn't get in. I wasn't smart enough. And I was
Yeah,
out of
I'm
state,
sure I
which
wouldn't
didn't
have been
help.
smart enough.
Yeah, I applied.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This bums me out, these types of stories.
It makes for good fodder, though, if nothing more.
I guess.
I don't know about football. All right. Well, on that note, thank you all for downloading, for listening, for supporting. Going out to verballers.com. Sign up at a minimum for that free tier. I'm going to be sending out news about Bowl Bingo a little bit later this week when we open the game. Bowl Bingo is going to be a weekly game as opposed to what we've done in the past with Winter Wonders, where that was a confidence pool. You could fill it out once and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with a confidence pool in this day and age, with respect to the bowl games, it's very difficult to have any confidence whatsoever because everything is changing all the time. So we wanted to simplify a little bit. We wanted to make it a little bit more straightforward. The way this game is going to work, and you will see more once we open it up later this week. Each week, over the span of 4 or 5 weeks, you will have an opportunity to fill out a college football bowl bingo card. You got to pick a couple items that you think are going to occur. Dan and I are going to put together the bank of items that you get to pick from. So on an ongoing basis, once a week, we'll open up the games, I think maybe Monday morning. You will have the opportunity to go in there, fill out your bingo card of the things you think are going to happen. We will have weekly prizes. We will have an overall prize.
So give me examples, by the way, of things we think were going to happen, like running back goes over 150 yards, successful fake punt called and executed, lightning delay, whether
anything
it's specific to a football play or, it'll be obvious. It won't be something like somebody catches a fade in the corner of the end zone. You're like, well, technically that wasn't a fade. That was
No. Exactly.
It'll be very specific.
We're talking about things like Minnesota -3 against Virginia Tech.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? That one's very, I don't know if that's the point spread. I'm making that up.
Yeah.
That's something that's very straightforward. In some cases, we might have Baylor passing yards against LSU, the over-under. So it's a mix of bets, a mix of point spread bets, a mix of prop bets that we have had throughout the year through our other game, Run the Board, which concluded this week, with a mix of other things that you and I come up with. So it is not just your standard bowl game that you are accustomed to playing, your pick'em, your bowl confidence pool, anything of that nature. This is a mix of all the bets. We're going to pick out some of the ones that we think are fun. On an ongoing basis, you will get an opportunity to fill out your bingo cards. You can keep track of them throughout the course of the week. And then if it doesn't go well, the good news, you can play again the following week. And it's entirely free. It's entirely free to play. The only thing you need to do is going out to verballers.com and sign up for our free tier. Again, it is free to play.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to pay. We are not going to spam you. That is the way that you get access to this game. It's going to open up a little bit later on this week. We will be teasing this out across our social feeds using the very cool logo that you put together. Which
Thank
is awesome.
you.
It's a cool. I can't do that.
By the way, hit the people with some of the prizes we gave out during our Run the Board weekly challenge this year.
I mean, we gave out an Apple Watch.
Gave out an Apple Watch. Gave a Solo Stove something, right?
Solo Stove Mesa XL. We gave out a PS5. I believe we gave out Yeti gift cards. We gave out all sorts of
cool pie, people.
Pies. I mean, there was no shortage of creativity.
Home field stuff, yeah.
It's our friends out at Home Field. Sure.
Nike, maybe? Did we do Nike this year?
We did do Nike at one point. All of these things that we have done over the course of the last 2 years now with Run the Board, we're going to circle the wagons here, get together, be as creative as we can, you and I, not just with respect to the game, but the prizes that we give out.
Yes.
So as we said, there'll be weekly prizes. There will be a grand prize as well. Details on that will be forthcoming. We're going to unveil a little bit more about all of that later on in the week. In the interim, though, for ballers.com, sign up for the free tier if you want to play some bowl bingo with Dan and I.
Yes, absolutely. Get to it and sign up. You can also be found at canoodlewithtie.com.
We do not own that domain. I
looked it up. It's available. $19.
You can buy that. I am not allotting any more company funds to more domains unless it's got a purpose.
Love a good domain.
Do you know how many domains we own at this point?
Like 5, 12. I don't know. We own a bunch.
12. I wish we only had 12. I was in there yesterday switching around some settings because I'm working on the bingo thing. I'm not kidding. We are spending hundreds of dollars a year on dumb domains that we bought over the course of time.
We got to rein in our domain budget.
I'm all about letting Smell Ty's hair expire.
Oh.
But I feel like
I will buy Canoodle with Ty. That's going to come out of my kids' college fund.
Oh,
that's it.
No. All right. Well, look, good to check in with the Verballerhood. You know where to go to sign up for the game. You know that the portal is ongoing. We're going to do our best to stay on top of that. As I said, a little bit later on this week, Bill Connolly, our friend from ESPN, is going to stop by. We'll put a bow on the season. We're also going to have an episode. I believe we're going to end up dropping it this weekend, where we go through the first batch, the first 17 non-playoff bowl games. Just give you points of intrigue, things to be interested in. If we can find bowl gifts, we're going to talk through what those are. For some reason, they're not as forthcoming about what they're giving out these days. I don't know if it's because they're doing the gift suite thing or if there's any kind of privacy issue, but we're going to do our best to try and mine that information because it is, of course, very, very important.
How about this?
The Verballerhood.
If you work for one of the bowls or you work for a team, anonymously tip us off. Be our swag mole. Do we own swagmole.com, Ty?
You can buy that with yours, yeah.
Be our swag mole to tell us what's in the suites, what players are getting. Solidverbal@gmail.com. Be our swag mole.
We will protect your identity.
We will protect your identity with our lives.
Yes, of course.
That's it.
Of course. So there is, of course, that to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do the bowl preview next Tuesday. We are going to do our first round playoff preview episode on the 4 games that are going to be played. And we are still working through what, if any, kind of alternate stream situation we will deploy here as we get into playoff season.
Yes.
So stay tuned for all of that and much, much more, Dan.
I will.
All right. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hillenbrand. As always, thank you for downloading, for listening, for supporting. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe. We will talk to you all on Thursday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace. We're on to Wake Forest. We're on to Cal.